the fact that you had the Companies Act that was modified about a decade ago, which made it mandatory for at least one woman to be on the board of directors, but yet their numbers don't seem to have really taken off that much. The representation of women on boards is still, in single digits percentage-wise. Why is that the case? 40 years after this.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sandeep, and you're right. I think back in 2014, SEBI mandated that every company should have at least one woman director. I understand right now the number is somewhere in the mid-70s, that 3 in 4 companies have fully complied. A lot of large companies, including public sector undertakings, haven't fulfilled that, which is kind of unacceptable. But I think sooner than later that's bound to change. I'm aware of the fact that a large global investment firm undertook a study to understand how many companies in India actually have followed this principle, and then went further to look at the 70-odd% that have actually complied with having one woman director, to see how many of these women directors are truly independent, not relatives, not spouses, daughters, sisters of the promoting family. And that number dropped by another 50%. So you're talking of less than a third of companies that have taken on the responsibility or taken on the task of getting one woman director, truly independent. Therefore, it's very clear that if a company is not willing to comply with both the letter and the spirit of the law, then they should not be investment worthy, right? And I think the message is getting across. So I think companies are recognizing. And I think more than just the economic imperative, I think progressive and smart companies recognize that whatever business you are in, 50% of, let's say, your consuming population is women. And if you don't get some degree of reflecting that aspect into your highest decision-making levels, you're actually handicapping yourself as a business, right? Women not only bring a great understanding of what one half of the world wants, yes. I think they bring certain additional skills when it comes to empathy, when it comes to understanding, which possibly get missed out in boards that are devoid of females. So I think it is, we have to move in the right direction, but it is tragic, if I can say pathetic, that a lot of companies still haven't complied with something as basic as this.
Absolutely. And Kartik, I want to ask you these figures, like in 2022, we're looking at the women just accounting for 7.2% of executive positions on boards compared to just 6% in 2017. Why is the growth so slow?
What really happens is, unfortunately, in our society, Sandeep, the common understanding is that a woman at best to occupy any CXO position is best suited for the role of CHRO. Right. And it is this perception, right or wrong, I don't know. I don't know if there is data to prove it or contest it otherwise, suggesting that because women are seemingly higher on the emotional quotient, EQ, right, and that tends to overshadow perhaps the actual IQ of women. Right. So I think one broad level understanding or misunderstanding is that women are better suited for HR roles and HR roles only. Right. The second problem is, which again has to do a lot with the culture, even when women have a good head start in their careers, even when their career is on an upswing, in their late 20s, early 30s, when they decide to have a child, maternity right. comes with a lot more baggage than just bearing that child for 9 months. Yes. And unfortunately, when you're out of action for those 9 months, if not those 9 months, maybe the 6 months after that, which is your maternity leave, when you come back and when you want flexibility, that is difficult to come by. So I think corporations across the board are not evolved enough yet to empathize with what right. the woman's anatomy, the body has gone through, yeah. and help them ease back into work. And I think on the other end of the spectrum, their absence is seen as an opportunity for somebody else who's not a woman or not a pregnant woman at that time to step into the role being performed by that woman who's gone on leave. And then when the woman who had actually gone on maternity leave comes back, the chair is occupied by somebody else. Right. So right. perhaps we don't have enough checks and balances, enough systems in place to enable these women to get what is rightfully theirs when it comes to the education and the experience and the skills that have gone into them getting that position. For them to hold on to it and build on it after yes. maternity becomes a major drawback for them.
So there's a sort of an entrenched gender bias, and I want to ask Sairee this to you. Sairee, do you believe there is a kind of entrenched gender bias in Indian boardrooms?
There sure is. I think if you're a woman in a boardroom today, chances are you're seriously outnumbered. When I started doing board positions, in fact, the first board I joined was a all-male board. I was the first woman on the board, and then we brought in, more women directors, and we became a 50% women board. But that took time. That took, a couple of years. I do believe it is, I think, a series of dominoes effect. Whether you look at, I think, the chain of the STEM pipeline or the MBA pipeline, and I think the boys club starts propagating there, and then I think propagates itself for the next 60, 70 years. The good news here is two numbers that are very heartening. One is India has actually, for the first time, more women passing out of MBA schools than men at this point in time.
Yes.
And this is last year's data, 2023 data. And the second number is that India now has an equal number of women, almost equal, 45 to 48% of women in STEM pipelines. So we hope that, a couple of decades down the line, the boys club is not just a boys club. It's actually a lot more equitable pipeline of recruits coming in from the bottom. And the other point is, of course, I don't think we need to treat maternity as a woman's issue. I think
Yeah.
families belong to both men and women. And we are also seeing that families are not just one kind of family anymore. I think the idea that a family is just a man, woman, child is 100-year-old idea. But I mean, if we go by where the world is today, two men can have a family and two women can have a family.
Yes.
And if workplaces are not prepared to be family friendly and child friendly and care friendly, it's not just for maternity that women go away. They also go away when parents are aging, when families need time. So I think this equitable distribution of caregiving across, and companies recognizing the fact that men also have families they can tend to. And it's unfortunate that men are given only 15 days of paternity leave, while some of them could be full-time caregivers in their respective families. So we are still a very, very nascent society in terms of how we are thinking about it. And I think it needs to reflect in a lot more progressive new world order. The world's changing and we need to change as well.
Yeah, we need to change as well. And the point that you made, Sairee, is very interesting. The caregiving needs to be distributed. It can't be the women's preserve alone. Lloyd, how much of an issue is that? Do you think that is the nub of the issue, the caregiving? Once that is kind of distributed among the two partners, women would be you could kind of unleash their animal spirits in the corporate arena.
Absolutely. I think equitable caregiving would address the issue to a large extent. Having said which, I think it's easier said than done. The realization there's one aspect which is biological. The fact that the woman would logically be taking some time off for childbearing. The other, I guess, is the unfortunate realization or recognition that the corporate world doesn't regard that time taken off for childbearing in early years. It's
Right.
always a bit of a catch-up that the lady has to play, that she actually took time off work.
Right.
Not recognizing that what she's done in the interim is something that, to my mind, would add immensely to her capability as an office worker. So I think that's one recognition. The second point, and I think Sairee touched upon that, is the good news is that the pipeline is getting more equitable. I think the second point is the recognition that a diverse workforce makes a company, shall we say, slightly more market savvy. The fact that you've got a great representation of the population to who you are selling or serving, I think makes for a positive. The third point I want to bring in is the recognition that a lot of the investment community has to learn to reward progressive companies. Companies that are proactive, that are willing to, recognize that, family raising is a responsibility, a joint responsibility of either gender. I think if the investment community starts rewarding and recognizing organizations like this, I think that will persuade a lot more companies, right? Today, a lot of companies, always use the excuse that a woman worker could be less productive because she's going to take time off, because the onus of running the family is predominantly hers, even when it comes to taking care of aging parents. I think as long as that cultural bias exists and companies begin to look at that, there's always going to be a little bit of a disadvantage for an
Right.
office worker versus her male counterpart. And I
Right.
think,
So
therefore, some level,
clearly,
the investment community also has to wake up, just like they did rewarding companies for their environmental consciousness, rewarding companies for their larger governance issues. I think the time is about right that companies start recognizing equity as a significant part of their investment objective.
well, it's been a while since Narayana Murthy and Sudha Murty had that conversation over 40 years ago. And as my co-panelists Sairee Chahal and Lloyd Mathias just mentioned, and Kartik, of course, the fact that we still have a long way to go, and we can only hope that it's sooner and not later. You can watch that fascinating dialogue with Barun Das episode only on the News9 Plus app. Do download it and watch. I'd like to thank Sairee and Lloyd for joining us. Kartik, Malhotra. News and developments continue on the News9 Plus show. Thanks for watching.